Okay, the third video on this unit now, Unit 2, is going to be dealing with the basic principles of the Constitution. Now, don't get these principles mixed up with the key concepts of the preamble of the Constitution. The preamble, remember, was the introduction. That was the setup of the Constitution. The six key concepts of that preamble was, again, the foundation of what the Constitution's all about. Now, these six principles of the Constitution is basically taking the Constitution and expanding it out into what exactly does the Constitution do. So these are the six key goals or instruments that the Constitution is trying to lay out there for the American public. All right, the first principle then is popular sovereignty. That asserts that the people are the source of any of the government power. It exists only with the consent of the governed. Now, I highlighted this because I really wanted you to get these main concepts down. People are the source, okay, and exists only with the consent of the governed. That is really important. Now, if you go back and you say, wait a minute, didn't you just get in talking about in Chapter 1 that this whole idea that democracy or democratic republic, whatever you're calling it, is that the people really aren't behind that? No. The concept here and the principle here is that it is supposed to be a government of the people. The problem with our democratic republic society we have, okay, is the fact that we don't do what the basic principle of the Constitution is requiring us to do, which is to rule as a group of people. We instead don't vote, we don't participate, we don't get involved, we don't stay informed, we don't do those basic civil duties that we're supposed to be doing and responsibilities that we're supposed to be doing, and so therefore we move back into that elitism or that popularism. But as far as what the Constitution's goal was, the goal was to have a popular sovereignty, the rule of the people. Okay, the second principle is that of limited government. Government is restricted in what it may do. Now, here again, you may look at this and go, wait, isn't this going against what the Democrats want? Because they want a big government. Well, no. That again gets into that social media and all that other crap that plays into it. In actuality, Republicans and Democrats both want a limited government and both want a big government. If you watch the Republicans, their argument is they want to limit a government when it comes to economics, when it comes to business. But Republicans want an expanded government when it comes to social issues. Vice versa for the Democrats. They want limited government when it comes to social issues, but when it comes to economic and business, then they want an expanded role. So even though the basic principle of the Constitution is for limited government, here again, putting it into practice and putting it into play as far as how our society works, as far as how our government actually employs itself, that's a little bit more difficult to actually do. But the idea is to limit the government, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in class. Number 3 is separation of powers. Okay, here you got your Congress, the legislative branch. Here's the president, that's the executive, and here's the court system. Okay, and then here are their powers. Okay, for the House and Senate, their responsibilities is to create all laws, create the laws. For the president, his cabinet and his independent agencies, their responsibility, enforce the laws. And then the court system, theirs is to interpret. You've got to remember those 3 key words and who they go with. Enforce, president. Create, Congress. Interpret, courts. That's the separation of powers between the 3. And the idea is that you keep all 3 as equal and as independent as possible. Now, this concept, this principle of the Constitution has probably been one of the better ones that has been able to be employed over the 200-some year history of our foundation, because we do keep this process. But again, because of things and because of changes in the world and changes in our society and everything else, we've had to adapt this a little bit. And we'll probably get into that a little bit as well tomorrow. Now, here is the fourth one, and this is the big one. This is the checks and balance system. Now, we're going to really get into a lot more of this tomorrow in class, but I really do want you to get into a little bit of it today. Okay, the checks and balance system allows the legislative, that's this one, okay, the executive, that's the president, and the judicial, that's the courts, to basically check and restrain one another. These are the checks, okay, that the legislative branch has on the judicial. These are the checks here, okay, that the president, okay, that the Congress, I'm sorry, can do to the president. So that comes this way. The president has checks on Congress. The judicial branch has checks on the legislative, and the judicial branch has checks on the executive. What you're going to have to know for the test is you're going to have to be able to look at these, and I'm going to give you different examples, and you got to be able to figure out whose check that would be. So, for example, the President of the United States, he's the one that gets the power to veto bills. Okay, he can decide whether a bill goes in or not. But Congress can override a president's veto. So let's say that the president that Congress has a bill. They want the president to sign it. Boom, they send it down here to him. The president vetoes it. The bill goes back to Congress. They can then override his veto to make it law, but the Supreme Court then can step in and they may declare that law either constitutional or not. Let's take Obamacare. Okay, Obamacare was a law that was proposed by the president. He wanted Congress to pass it. They eventually do pass it and gets it put in. The Supreme Court took the law of the Affordable Care Act. They interpreted the law to see if it was constitutional or not and said yes, it was. So that's how all three branches can work on one key area on healthcare to be able to put it through. Then you can do that for the other ones. The President of the United States can appoint people to his positions that he wants to, judges and other positions. Okay, just because he appoints them doesn't put him in. Congress has to okay that. They have to approve it. The President of the United States, again, can grant reprieves and pardons. The Supreme Court has a check on the president because they can go in and say some of the things that the president does is unconstitutional. So if the president would go create an executive order allowing for illegal immigration, the Supreme Court could come back and say no. So they have this system that checks and balances all the time with each other. Okay, the fifth one, and this is where we're going to kind of end it at right now in your video, is on judicial review. And again, we're going to get into a little bit more of this tomorrow in class, but it basically consists of the power of a court to determine the constitutionality of a government action, which we've been talking about under the checks and balance system. How this power came about to the Supreme Court was done by the court case Marbury versus Madison, which we're going to watch tomorrow in class. For 2 days before before John Adams was going to leave office, who was the president at the time, okay, outgoing President Adams appoints 58 judges. However, he was not able to get those appointments all passed out in time before his presidency ended. What happened was one of those guys, this one here, William Marbury, was not able to get his judgeship. So he goes to the new president who came in to take office, which was Thomas Jefferson, and his Secretary of State, which is James Madison, and he goes in and asks them for his judgeship. They refused to give it to him because they were not the ones who created it. Adams was, who was from a different political party. Marbury then sues the Secretary of State Madison in order to get his judgeship back. The guy who has to rule on the case, his name is John Marshall. He will find himself in a huge dilemma because he wants to support his friend Marbury and to support Adams, who was his president that appointed him, but he also knows the law. And basically the law was on the side of Madison here. So this case became hugely important to set up the concept of what would become known as judicial review, the ability to declare laws unconstitutional. And we'll kind of go over that again tomorrow.